Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. Today's guest is known globally as the CEO Whisperer. He's built and scaled companies to massive success, including 1-800-GOT-JUNK from $2 million to $106 million in just 6 years. But perhaps even more impressive is how he's turned that experience into helping top leaders build companies that thrive without constant firefighting. He's the founder of the COO Alliance, the world's leading network for chief operating officers, and the author of several best-selling books, including Vivid Vision, The Second in Command, and Meetings Suck. His work has been featured everywhere, from Forbes to Inc. and Harvard Business Review, and he's coached some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. Cam Herold, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Brad, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You are one of the most impressive people in the world that I observe for your hustle. If I was ever to get my kids to say, look at someone who I want them to understand what hustle means, it would be go online and look at Cam Herold. And I say that with the greatest of respect. And for me as an entrepreneur, hustle is where, like, that is what you need.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about your journey going where you started, where you ended up today.
Yeah, it's interesting that you even mentioned hustle. I've never really thought about it, but I've actually had that since a very, very young age. I remember the very first entrepreneurial venture that I had, I was 7. And my mom kind of caught me cold calling dry cleaners out of the yellow pages and negotiating with them to recycle coat hangers. I'd noticed in one of the stores at a dry cleaner, they were paying about 2 cents a coat hanger, and I was negotiating with them, and I think I got them up to 3.5 cents a coat hanger. And the guy wanted to owe me pay me 3, and I wanted 4 cents. And finally, I said 3.5, and he goes, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 7. How about 3.5?" Like, I didn't even skip a beat. It just, like, I answered his question, and I still progressed. And I was hustling as a young kid. My dad was an entrepreneur. Both sets of grandparents were entrepreneurs, and they taught and groomed my brother, my sister, and myself to all be entrepreneurs. My sister and I probably had the hustle more than my brother at that very early age, but he's still an entrepreneur today. But we were, from a very, very young age, spotting opportunities and trying to capitalize on them. So I'm glad you noticed it. So yeah, we were groomed as entrepreneurs. I had probably a dozen or more little entrepreneurial ventures by the time I was 18. When I was 19, I had my first real company. I had 12 employees when I was in second year university, running a house painting business that I owned. And I managed and ran that business for 3 summers during university. Had paid off all my own university bills, had bought a house the year that I graduated university with my money, and then ended up traveling around the world. And then I started working at the head office of a franchising company for the house painting industry called College Pro Painters. And I was one of the top 30 people in the organization, where we recruited, hired, and trained university students to be franchisees. So by the time I was 8 years old, I'd recruited and trained 120 entrepreneurs. And that was before business coaching was a thing. So business coaching really started in 1993. And by that point, I'd already coached 120 entrepreneurs. So I kind of grew up in that era of advising business owners. And then I was a partner in a couple of different companies, minority shareholder in a couple of different companies that we scaled, one that we took public, second one that we sold. And then I was involved in an early mastermind community called the Young Entrepreneurs Organization. It's now called EO. I joined back when it was YEO. And one of the guys that joined our forum, his name was Brian, was starting a company that was called the Rubbish Boys. And I met Brian when he was doing about $1 million in revenue. A couple of years later, he had gotten that up to about $2 million in revenue. And I was looking for my next big coaching engagement to coach a company. I just exited this internet company. And Brian asked me to coach him. And I said I would coach him, but I would never work for him. Well, 6.5 years later, we built it together, and I was the COO right from that day until we left. We took it from 2 million to 106 million in 6 years. I was employee number 14, and when I left, we had about 3,100 employees system-wide. We'd landed 5,200 stories about the company even before social media existed, including being on Oprah. But anyway, I left there 18 years ago. I've been coaching companies all over the world. I've written 6 books. I've now been paid to speak in 29 countries. I've been paid to speak on every single continent, including Antarctica. I've actually been paid to speak probably 7 or 8 times, even in Australia alone. And I spoke in Melbourne, Australia, just 3 months ago. So that's kind of my story.
Very cool. What a very cool story. I think the first time that we met was around 2004-ish, and you were speaking with Brian Scudamore about the 1-800-GOT-JUNK story, as I recall, and how you can hack the media, I think it was, and just about the amazing story that is 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I live in a place called Perth in Australia, which is the most isolated capital city in the world on the west coast, and I know when I see a 1-800-GOT-JUNK...
Go ahead.
Yeah, when I see a 1-800-GOT-JUNK truck in Perth, Australia, I know that it's had a real, genuine global reach. Go on, Cam.
We started 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Actually, in Australia, it's called 1800-GOT-JUNK, but we started there in around 2004. We hired someone over Skype. I was the only person in the company that had ever been to Australia, so I actually knew the lay of the land a little bit. But we hired someone over Skype, trained him over Skype, flew him to Vancouver to train him, used all of our North American suppliers, and in the first year we were already open and successful. And then 20 years later, I was back in Australia back in January this year, and I saw trucks of ours in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and I have spoken in Perth. I actually spoke to the EO chapter in Perth at the Mint in Perth, which was a unique facility to do a speaking event at. Indeed.
So tell us, in the 1-800-GOT-JUNK story, it's quite well documented, stories about getting onto Oprah and doing a lot of those things. And at that point, I mean, moving rubbish is very easy to commoditize, very easy to copy, okay? But you guys seemed to penetrate and managed to be able to scale. So is there something that isn't often talked about in the story, like one big decision or one event that comes to mind?
Yeah,
that was perhaps in that story.
Yeah, there were 3. So when I joined the organization, there were 17,000 independent junk removal companies in North America. So it was not a new idea. It wasn't a unique idea. Brian had actually seen a truck at a McDonald's drive-thru that had Mark's Hauling on the side, and he thought, I can go do that. Bought a truck for $700, started knocking on doors, and he was in the rubbish removal or junk removal space. So it's not like he invented a product or a category. We worked very hard to professionalize the category. So one of the 3 things we did was to brand a service that had never really been branded and create a culture around something that was a little bit more than a business and a little bit less than a religion. We built something by design that was in the zone of a cult, and I executed that. That was my strategy to bring that in, because we needed to attract great franchisees and great employees without having a business yet. We needed to attract them based on the dream. Even when we were on Oprah, we only had 23 franchisees when we were on Oprah. We had no business being on Oprah, but we had cold called her company and the team at Harpo Studios for about a year, sent them notes, sent them letters, sent them blue wigs, called them until they were sick of hearing about us. And then Oprah saw us in a newspaper one day in the USA Today, brought the paper into the office and said, have we heard of these guys yet? And the team started laughing, saying, have we heard of them? They don't stop calling us. And she said, let's do a story about them similar to what the USA Today covered. So it was that hustle and that culture was number one. The second thing that we did was we raised our prices. I raised our prices by about 40% in the second or third week that I was there. Everybody in the company was terrified that we were going to go out of business because I raised our prices so high, but no one was making money. Brian wasn't making money, the franchisees weren't making money, the people in the trucks weren't making money. We were paying our call center agents minimum wage. It was a bad model that by design, no one was going to succeed. So I thought we had to go out swinging. And I wanted to position us as the kind of FedEx of junk removal, or the Starbucks of junk removal, as Brian used to call it, so that we could be the premium priced product in an industry where you could get junk removal or coffee anywhere. You know, Starbucks didn't do anything unique other than put a brand on coffee shops and call you by your name. We just did the same thing with junk removal. So that culture. And then the third was we had no money for marketing, no real marketing for sales. So what we did was we just cold called and phoned every media outlet that we could talk to and told them about the vision of where we were taking the company over the next 3 years, and convinced them to write stories about this culture in an industry that had never had a brand. And that was, again, by design. Boy, I'll tell you, if we were able to have started the company in 2007 when Facebook was launching, we would have been much bigger, much faster. Currently today, they're $850 million in system-wide revenue. I think we could have done that 10 years earlier if we were able to put all the social media, put all the stories we were landing on social. But those were the three things: PR, a cult, and raise prices to a premium.
We have a common friend in a person called Kevin Lawrence, who wrote a book called Your Oxygen Mask First.
Yep.
Listeners to this show would be aware that I did a podcast with Kevin, 166 episodes, called The Growth Whisperers. So how long have you known Kevin? Any reflections on Kevin, who he is?
Yeah, Kevin and I met in roughly 2007, I'm going to say, or 2008, about a year after I left 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I was at a Vern Harnish event. Back in the day, it was called the Gazelles event, now called Scaling Up. And I was at this event, and I was speaking on a stage in Atlanta, Georgia, doing a keynote to about 400 entrepreneurs. And I came off the stage, and this guy, Kevin Lawrence, came up to me, and he goes, "Oh my God, you're Cameron." And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "I thought you were a saying." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "For 3 days, everybody's been walking around this conference saying, 'I need a Cameron.' I thought it was like a flywheel or a BHAG or a swim lane. Like, I didn't know what a Cameron was. And now I realized they were just saying that Brian, the CEO, had you. They needed someone like you. They needed a COO. They needed that yin and yang partner." So Kevin was the first one to really, I think, from the outside, identify that Brian and I had been that two-in-a-box model the entire time. We'd really been that yin and yang partner. And all these other hundreds of entrepreneurs realized they didn't have one, didn't know where to find one, didn't know how to build that relationship with one. You know, I talk about this in my book, The Second in Command, that Brian and I had a bit of an unfair advantage. Prior to me joining him as an employee, we'd been in a mastermind forum group together for 4 years, where he watched me build 2 EO qualifying companies, one to 60 million, another to about 100 million. And then he also was my best man at my wedding before I started to work for him. So we already had this incredible amount of trust, a really unique opportunity to become really close friends. He basically had a 4-year interview of me before I started to work with him. So, you know, there's systems to be able to do that with a new person, but that was how Kevin and I met, and that was the unfair advantage that I think others wanted.
It's hilarious. When I met Kevin, he didn't come up and say, "I need a Brad," but he came up to me. I was at a Gazelles conference, must have been 2012. And he said, "You're doing exactly what I did when I joined this organization. You're talking to everyone and you were just a sponge." So he is a shout out to Kevin. Unlikely he's listening, but if he is, he's a great human being.
I'll drop him a note when I'm off the podcast too, because he and I have spent a lot of time together over the years in Vancouver.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time with him as well. Great guy. So you really jumped straight into COO, and it's been I guess it's been a key part of your life in terms of the work that you've done with Brian. That is, I guess, well, let's just say one of your greatest hits, for want of a better term.
Well, it's funny. It was actually, you know, the two companies prior to that were equally as large. You know, one company we took public It's now called Gerber Auto Collision, is now a $2 billion, the largest collision repair chain in the world. And I was one of the 3 co-founders of that in the franchising group. And then the second was a private currency company. You would know Bartercard in the United States,
Yeah.
but we were the biggest barter company, private currency company in the world. We built that company up, and it's still a publicly traded company. So I'd done it a couple times before. With Brian, it was because of all the free PR that we were generating that my name got attached to a vehicle that was, really a flywheel, for sure.
You speak about the yin and the yang, I think was how you described it, and you called the COO role the most misunderstood seat at the leadership table. What do you think
Yeah.
mistakes do you think that CEOs make when hiring or managing a COO? And
Well,
how does
it's
that limit
interesting.
their growth?
I've had it constantly in the last 18 years where people will come to me and try to throw money at me saying, "Oh, you built 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Can I pay you to be my COO?" I'm like, "You don't know anything about me. I don't know anything about you. You don't know my skill sets and my weaknesses. I don't know what roles of the business you even need me to run." Even though I've built out the COO Alliance and we've had about 800 members now from 17 countries, I would be a horrible COO for most of their companies because it's the wrong stage for me, or it's in the wrong industry for me, or it needs the wrong skill set. So that's one. The other reason it's a very misunderstood role is there's different types of COOs that a CEO might need. So even the current COO at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, Eric Church, who's been there for about 12 years now, Eric and I have known each other for 37 years. We started a fraternity together in Ottawa, Canada in 1987. I was president year 1, he was president year 2. He's now the COO at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. He would have been a horrible COO for my 7 years, and I would have been a horrible COO for his 12. He wasn't entrepreneurial. He's more mid-market to corporate. He didn't understand franchising, but he knew how to run one that was already built. So I was coming into an organization that needed my skills, needed my entrepreneurial kind of flair, and needed someone to come in as really the mentor and the partner. Whereas now, Brian doesn't need a mentor. He needs someone to kind of be there as his other half. So that's kind of a misunderstood component to the role too. And then I guess the last is just to really understand that every COO's skills has to be that yin and yang match to the CEO's weaknesses. So I had to be really good at the stuff that Brian sucked at. I had to want to work on the areas that he hated, and he had to like the areas that I didn't like. So I was not very good at IT. I was not very, very deep in the finance space. Brian liked both of those areas a lot. He liked those details. I was horrible at that. And so I just stayed away from those two things. Brian stayed in those swim lanes. And then because I was coming in with that domain expertise. So I think that's some of where the misunderstood component comes in. But it's funny, my original brand that I started when I left Got Junk 18 years ago was called the Back Pocket COO. And it was my original website, my original email. It was because I had CEOs that had me in their back pocket. And I basically said, you can't afford me full time, but you can't afford to not have me there advising you. And that was probably 7 or 8 years before the fractional roles started to happen. I was basically playing that fractional COO for a dozen different companies.
What do you agree with or disagree with when it comes to visionary integrator in your real world experience?
Okay, so the visionary integrator terms come from Gino Wickman's book Traction, from the EOS model, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I love the model until you get to about 50 or 60 employees, and then it starts to break down. When you get to about 50 or 60 employees, you need to migrate over to a tool called Metronome, or you need to go over to, even scaling up, you need about 100, 150 employees. But you kind of have to move away from that more entrepreneurial model. When Gino talks about, and Mark Winters talks about, the visionary integrator, the visionary is the CEO, the integrator is that COO. They say one thing that I completely disagree with, and it's because it really does break down when you get to about 50 people. They say that the integrator, the COO, should be the tiebreaker in the business. I completely disagree. I think the COO is there to get the team to debate, to get the team to have healthy conflict, to have the team look at the data, to have the team look at the SWOT and the analysis and to think about the strategy and have the team make a decision and come to consensus. So the CEO is there to help them do that, but not to say, oh, I'm the seventh vote, so I say X. That's kind of like when mom and dad said, because I said so, or this is my home. It's like, well, that's stupid. So, but that's kind of the role the COO does need to play when they have a junior team, right? When you have a management team that's never really done it before and you kind of need to make the decisions for them. But it's usually because you have a team of directors. But when your team are vice presidents, like true VPs or true C-level, then the integrator is not making the decisions. They're more directing strategy, aligning people, removing obstacles, dealing with the recruiting, making sure that we're working on the right things and that they have the right resources in play, and then growing people. But they're not there to break the tie.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Being a Canadian, Canadians are always so polite. I was worried there might not be something that you disagree with, but I appreciate the insights, again, shared through experience. So thank you.
Well, and they're just
go on.
Their book is written for that small company, right? So if they say it's for a small company, I would agree. But when they make the general statement that that's always what the integrator does, then I can show you that that's not true.
Yep, and I think that probably correlates with my experience as well. Changing gears, you've very publicly spoken about mental health issues and the challenges that many entrepreneurs experience when it comes to issues like ADD, ADHD, a lot of those things. And in my experience, these profound cross entrepreneurs everywhere, it doesn't mean that they all have it, but certainly it's very, very common. In your experience, what would you suggest that entrepreneurs who have these types of conditions can do to manage that, first of all, and to use that as a superpower?
So I'm so glad you asked this question. So I have 17 of the 18 signs of attention deficit disorder clinically diagnosed. I also have 11 out of the 11 traits of bipolar disorder. And then I have a form of dyslexia called dyscalculia, where I flip a lot of my numbers. When I write down a string of numbers, I transpose them or flip them. So I actually won an award years ago that's given to one person a year on the planet for overcoming severe learning disabilities. Years ago, they gave it to Bruce Jenner. They've given it to Barbara Corcoran. I received the award in 2016 or 2017 from the International Dyslexia Association. So the first step that entrepreneurs need to do when they have these things, I'm not going to call them disorders, because they're not disorders, they're a superpower, is to recognize that it is a superpower. So I recognized it when I was in grade 6, and my dad was called to the school and met with the principal, and I had to sit outside the principal's office. And I heard my dad yelling basically at the principal, and I heard him say, "There's nothing wrong with my son. The problem is the effing school. The problem is the medical system. The problem is you don't understand entrepreneurs." And he walked out the door, he grabbed me by the hand, he said, "Come on, we're going for lunch." And I said, "What happened?" He said, "I just need you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. You're more like me than you are like them." And that flipped a switch for me at a very young age. Yeah, well, I realized I'm not like teachers. I knew I wasn't. I didn't get them. They don't move at my pace. They don't think at my pace. They're talking about stuff that's irrelevant. Like it just doesn't make any sense. So of course I don't fit into them. Of course I have a disease or a disorder because I'm trying to sell stuff to the kids when I'm 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 because they're buying it. And I see these opportunities and class is boring. And I'm talking a lot because I'm gregarious and I think out loud and I'm always answering the questions because I get it quickly. But then I don't do well on the tests because I get bored and I have other distractions going on. So they kept telling me to pay attention and work harder and be like everybody else. I feel like I was emotionally abused in the system and not actually educated. So step one is to recognize these are not disorders. The attention disbursement allows you to see everything. You see what's happening with the economy, with the market, what time it is. You notice what's happening with the energy and the pulse with your employees and marketing. You notice little mistakes with websites. You just notice everything. But because there's so much input, it's hard. So what you need to do is get rid of it by delegating it to other people. That's a strength. So if I was so hyper-focused, I'd miss all the other things, which would be to my detriment. On the bipolar component, the mania is why people will quit their jobs. It's why they'll follow us. It's why they'll invest in us. It's why the banks will loan us money, is we're so gregarious and so much energy that you can't help but follow the Pied Piper. So it's why most of these entrepreneurial .com type entrepreneurs had that form of infectious energy. It's why people follow. It's another reason why you don't follow doctors and lawyers and engineers that much, is they don't have the right energy to attract you. So they kind of push you away. And then because we tend to not do well in the school system, because we're kind of bent differently, we end up running these little entrepreneurial ventures. Now, I do think that entrepreneurship has become too trendy. I think that we've really done a very big disservice in getting so many parents to want their kids to be entrepreneurs when the kids don't have the entrepreneurial DNA. I believe that the entrepreneurial DNA is ADD and is bipolar disorder and is those strong leadership traits. And if your kid isn't good at sales and good at leadership and good at public speaking and good at problem solving, and they don't have that ADD and bipolar, they will not be successful as an entrepreneur. And I see more train wrecks of entrepreneurs, more entrepreneurial failures from the A students, who when they encounter problems, when they fail, they get all flustered and screwed up and they can't deal with it. I was failing every test and every exam. I was totally used to failure. So failure never bothered me. It just meant I wasn't hustling enough.
Yeah. I think it's a message that's not out there enough. I have done a bit of research and worked myself on DNA and how it applies, and had a DNA scientist on the podcast who said there's absolutely, which is no surprise to you and I, and completely a correlation between entrepreneurship and some of the conditions that you've mentioned.
Yeah, it's just real stuff. And what's interesting is when I was growing up as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship was not cool, right? I was in grade 6 in 1976. Entrepreneurship did not start to become cool until 1995 or 1996 with the rise of the first internet boom. And then when social media came around, 2007, 8, 9, when entrepreneurs were able to tell the story, because the media wasn't telling the story. The media had all the entrepreneurs as capitalist, greedy, pigs. But when you, on social media, entrepreneurs could tell the story of, here I am on my boat, here I am at my beach, here's all the cool stuff I'm doing. Entrepreneurship became cool. So I think we're going to see a bit of a pendulum come back where people become entrepreneurial. There maybe become freelancers and they do their job for multiple companies, but they won't necessarily build a company around them. So I think it's better that people become entrepreneurial, but not necessarily become entrepreneurs.
And that's the way it was before the rise of the corporation. Most people needed to have small businesses to make a living and earn money or survive.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about a couple of your books, and my word, there's so many to choose from in the time that we've got. I guess kudos on that, A, but B, the topics are quite relevant. So I'm going to start with vivid vision. First of all, if you could explain what is a vivid vision, but second to that, is there a story that comes to mind where someone created a vivid vision that seemed unrealistic, completely unrealistic, but then they managed to achieve it?
I can give you 3 vivid visions from Australia where companies went on to become stratospheric successes. So back in the day, I used to call it a painted picture. I changed the name to Vivid Vision about 8 years ago. But the first person that I taught in Australia to do a vivid vision, what she called a painted picture, her name was Naomi Simpson. She went on to build a company called Red Balloon Days, ended up as one of the dragons on Dragon's Den in Australia. I had lunch with Naomi about 4 months ago when I was in Sydney. Naomi crafted a vivid vision or a painted picture for what Red Balloon Days would look like, act like, and feel like in 2010, 3 years out. And it sounded crazy because she was this small little business. But the ability to share that vivid vision with suppliers and bankers and customers and employees started to create this cult-like energy around her and around her brand. And it started to permeate everything that she'd done. I remember going into her office around 2010 and being kind of blown away with what I saw. because it was starting to come true. So that was number one. The second example was a guy from from Melbourne, Australia. And he was building out a physio company called the Physio Co. I taught Tristan White. So this was back around 2012 or 2013. I taught Tristan White the concept of the vivid vision. Again, I had lunch with Tristan in February in Melbourne. He went on to become the #1 company to work for in Australia, built the Physio Co. over multiple years to become one of the best brands, incredible entrepreneur. But he really does credit that alignment with his vision of what he wanted to build and this excitement. And he was a nobody, independent physical therapist with a brand and an idea to build something bigger. And then the third was someone out of Sydney, again, who built a company called Think EI, and his name was Ben Thompson. And Ben built a multi-$100 million company in Sydney and was also ranked at one point as the #1 company to work for in Australia. Again, credits the vivid vision at helping him create that cult-like working environment. So there's just 3 examples out of Australia alone.
That's awesome. I remember you presenting Painted Picture. It could have been in Boston at the Entrepreneurial Masters program, I think.
Yeah, and I actually hold one of my Alliance events at Boston at MIT's Endicott House every September. I have COOs from all over the world come in. And that's where you would have met me back at the EMP program, or in those days it was probably called Birthing a Giants, but now it's called the Entrepreneurial Masters program.
Yeah, for sure. Under EO. Yeah, Tristan, I actually worked with Tristan for 8 or 9 years, and he was a massive fan of the Painted Picture, the vivid vision, and the bit that you missed out, which is so important, that he actually won Best Place to Work in Australia for, I think, 11 consecutive years, which is, no one's done it. It's just huge.
It's insane. Well, that shows the power of the cult, right? The culture of alignment with the vision, inspiring leader, and then empowering and growing the people. But if everyone's aligned, they all start making the decisions that you would like them to be making. And when you create that energy and that excitement, because nobody wants to join what you have today, they all want to build something. But if they don't know what that something looks like, you can't get them to quit their job and come. But when they see it, they all want to be a part of building that bigger future together.
What's the difference between a good and a bad painted picture / vivid vision?
Yeah, so the good vivid vision is one that speaks in the present tense. So it speaks as if you're standing December 31st, 3 years from now, and you already see it coming true. So you describe what is. You don't say what we are doing, you say what we've done, so that it anchors people and they can feel it. That's number one. Number two is making sure that you only lean out 3 years. You're not describing your company 10 years out or 30 years out. It's too far out there that people just don't get inspired. They can't really wrap their head around it. There's a difference between a BHAG, right? That big, hairy, audacious goal, like colonizing Mars or building a world-class brand versus, and you need a BHAG, but it's different. And then I guess the third would be putting too many metrics or numbers in there. It's not a series of goals. It's not a series of empirical measures. It's more of a qualitative description of what the company looks like, acts like, and feels like 3 years in the future, so that every sentence becomes a finished state that you can make come true.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you.
And then there's also a saying that Thomas Edison, who invented. Right. Let me just say one part on this again, though. It's not what you write in the vivid vision that matters, it's how you execute against that, right? So it's like using systems from Metronome or Scaling Up or Next Level or EOS. You need to, vision without execution is hallucination. So you really have to make sure that you actually put the systems and the people in place to make every sentence come true. Merely writing a vivid vision and putting it in your drawer is a dream.
Yeah. And that was one of the questions that I was planning to ask, was about how do you, like the day after you sit and you fall in love with your vivid vision, what do you do? Like, how do you make sure that you get traction on it?
Well, one is to make sure that you roll it out to your leadership team and get buy-in. And then second is you make sure you roll it out to the entire company and you keep all of the people that are excited by it, and you one by one get rid of the people who don't buy into it. I remember years ago in Vancouver, Canada, I was teaching this concept of the vivid vision to a CEO and his entire company. The CEO had crafted this incredible 4-page vivid vision. Dean Gagnon was his name. He was rolling out the vivid vision to all of his employees. And at the end, he said, about 15% of you don't like what you just heard. And there were 80 employees. So he was saying 12 of you don't like what you just heard. Within about 2 weeks, 12 of the people had quit. And 2 years later, Dean ranked as the #2 company in all of Western Canada to work for. The other company that ranked #1 was another client of mine, Nurse Next Door. So when a company rallies around the vivid vision and you get the wrong people off the bus, the right people are aligned and they are excited and they are inspired. And then it's making sure that you reread it with people every quarter, that you send it to your suppliers, you send it to your banker, you send it to your accountant and your lawyer. You have everybody reading what you're building so they can conspire to help make it come true. If you keep the vision just internal, you're missing that opportunity, right? So it's sharing it with the world and sharing it frequently, and then figuring out what 1 or 2 projects can you do to make each sentence come true.
Very good. In the book you wrote called Meetings Suck, great title, you talk about why most meetings are a waste. And if you think about mid-market companies, what is one meeting that you believe should be banished? And is there one that you think should replace it?
I would get rid of every meeting until you teach people how to run meetings and how to participate and attend meetings. So around 4 years ago, Elon Musk sent out an email to all of his employees, and he said, if you're in a terrible or if you're in a shitty meeting, stand up and leave the meeting. I was a reference for Elon in his first round of funding in January of 95. His brother used to work for me in 93. So I sent a message off to him and I said, don't tell your employees to leave shitty meetings, fix the meetings so that they aren't sitting in shitty meetings in the first place. So I would get rid of every meeting and I would have every employee read the book Meetings Suck so they understand the basic systems to run a meeting, to run a Zoom call, to run an in-person event, so that then you can actually get results from them. Because meetings can be very, very proactive and very productive if people know how to run them, they know how to attend them, and they can opt out of them by saying, hey, I read the agenda, I saw the purpose and outcome, I don't think I really need to be there, I have other work that's more impactful, and you actually celebrate that versus, oh, we'll just invite all these people because I don't want to hurt their feelings. That's completely counterproductive. So the reason that meetings suck is that we suck at running meetings. It's not that meetings are bad, it's that people are bad at running them.
No agenda, no attender.
Yeah.
How can I forget that? Yeah. So you've got to be good. You've got to be masterful. If you used to do another job, you've got to be masterful at leading. I can't remember if I got it from you or someone else, but the CEO really has one tool, and that is meetings. The carpenter has 400 tools. You've got to be masterful.
I think the CEO's role is actually to grow people, even less to 100%. Run meetings. Because if the CEO does it right, you can grow the skill sets and the confidence of the people so that they can run meetings for you. Right? The CEO's really big job is to ensure that they have the right people in the right seats with the right skills and the confidence and connections to actually work towards that vivid vision. You know, Fortune magazine asked me in 2003, how do you hold your employees accountable? I said, I don't. I hire accountable people.
That's a cool answer. I hire accountable people. I'm going to pick up what you said there and go back to hustle about Elon Musk. I think I remember you sending 200 books of Meetings Suck to Elon Musk. I don't know how long, maybe 5 years ago. And you were saying...
It was right after he sent that text message out.
Yeah, your meetings are garbage. You've got to get these people to read it. Now, that illustrates your point. But it also goes back to like your phenomenal hustle. And I'm going to go back to another story. I remember when we were at Endicott House in Boston, and you were explaining how on the back of your laptop, you sold space. Give me your company sticker and it's going to cost you, I don't know, $50,000 a year or some amount. I speak at 2,500. Thank you very much. And you speak at all of these events every year. You're going to be out there and associated with this brand, and then I'm going to take it off in a year's time. I mean, it's just...
I did it for 3 years in a row. I had 5 sponsors per year, pay $2,500. I also had someone sponsor the back of my phone And then I got a clothing sponsor, Robert Graham, to give me free shirts and belts, and I wore their clothing on stage and just mentioned that I was sponsored by Robert Graham. Yeah, I was always that hustle, entrepreneurial kid. I love it. It's just the game. It's fun.
I love it too. It's something that some people don't do or don't get. And I think it's closely connected with Free PR, your other book. What do you think holds entrepreneurs back? Maybe not from going to the level that we've illustrated with yourself, but from doing some of these things, from taking more of a step towards proactively hustling?
Well, I think I was very fortunate that I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. And again, I was groomed to be an entrepreneur. I mean, my dad gave me a few mottos quite early in life. One was, if it's worth having, it's worth asking for. So I'm very persistent to get the free seat or the upgrade or the story in the press, or I just ask. And then I tell my boys that no only means no in the bedroom, right? In business, no just means I haven't explained myself properly. It doesn't mean no. I mean, if someone says F off, go away, don't ever call me, yeah, that's pretty much a no. But until they say F off, go away, I just haven't been that clear. Now, in the bedroom, no definitely means no. That's a hustle mentality. Yeah, and I think it's just, if you honestly believe in your product and you're excited about your product, then you're just going to push for it. I also have always believed that we've heard the phrase minimum viable product, or MVP.
Yeah.
I believe that it's more minimum viable everything, that you just need to get it done and get it out the door, because momentum creates momentum. The more that you try to perfect everything, the more that you are, a perfectionist or procrastinating to do something, that just slows down the inevitable growth of the business. So I'm more about get it done, get it out the door, momentum, create momentum. Like the way I got through school was a series of B minuses and C pluses, and C minuses was just get her done and get out the door and get the degree and get out of this place, right?
That's so cool. If you could install one habit into the CEOs that you work with, and probably have worked with in the past, to help them lead better and grow faster, what habit do you think that would be?
Yeah, I did a video about this yesterday, and I shared it on my Instagram account, and I said that if any entrepreneur or CEO thinks that their employees care about the company as much as you do, you are delusional. No employee is going to care about your company anywhere close to as much as you do. So what your job is as the CEO is to care about your employees' lives, their dreams, their goals, their insecurities, their fears, to help them with their bucket list. If you care more about your employees' life than anybody else, they'll care about your business more than they've ever cared before. But if you try to get the employee to care about the company and all you focus about on the company, you're forgetting that this is just a paycheck. This is just what they do to make money. So the thing I would have all CEOs focus on more is care about your people, celebrate your people, say thank you to people. Knowing their birthday, that's like saying I have played jazz at a coffee shop. They all play jazz. I sell sweets. They all have sweets. You really have to care. That's number one. Say thank you way more. Share gratitude way more. Praise for all the stuff that's getting done way more. Celebrate all the projects that are getting completed and the goals that are getting hit way more. And then that balances out all the stuff that you notice that's wrong or broken or fixed, or the new goals. So it's kind of praising people to success more than the other. And it's also just caring about them more than anybody else does. That's what I'd have every entrepreneur focus on.
What a wonderful human response. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, you're welcome. And the reality is, I got a new tattoo, and it's the Ram Dass quote, walking each other home, in Hindi. And it's to remind me that none of this matters. Like, this is just what we do to make money. At the end of the day, we all die. I was laughing with someone in Dubai earlier this year. I said, we all end up as a kebab. We're just going to be burnt meat on a stick at the end of the day. Like, none of this matters. So if you can just care about your employees and have a good time and have fun along the journey, they will work harder. They will care more, because they'll just like you. And it's easier to work hard for somebody you like.
Yeah, indeed. The book that I'm working on at the moment is called Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better. And it's about, rather than trying to motivate and stimulate your ego, work to build a better business. How would you describe, or what do you think that a better business looks like for you and the people that you work around?
Well, I would absolutely say that it's that. It's building that culture of celebration and success and gratitude and celebrating the core values and caring about people, like really, truly caring. That's number one. Number two is we're in a stage of change that is massive. And right now, if you're an entrepreneur worried that AI is going to put you out of business, it will. If you're an employee that thinks that AI that's going to put you out of business, it will, unless you're a company or an employee that's leveraging AI. There's not a single great employee that will get replaced by AI if you're the employee leveraging AI. There's not a single company out there that will get replaced by AI tools if you're a company that's engaged in embracing AI. So I would become a very, very AI-driven, AI-focused, AI-centric, caring company, and I would be powering all of your people with AI tools. I would have AI experts speaking on a weekly basis. I would have AI lunch and learns. I would be having AI book reports where employees share their tools. I would literally be powering people up. And it's kind of like back in October of 2000, I walked into 1-800-GOT-JUNK carrying a laptop, and Brian laughed at me. He's like, "What are you going to do, walk from meeting to meeting with a laptop?" And I went, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do." And 2 days later, I see him and he's sitting at his desk and he's writing up his notes from the meeting we just had. And I said, "What are you doing, writing up your notes from the meeting?" And he went, "Yeah." 2 hours later, he'd bought a laptop. Right? AI is now a tool that every single company out there, and it's the only ones that actually embrace this quickly that will win. There's a saying that I heard years ago that if the rate of change outside your business is greater than the rate of change inside your business, you're out of business. And that is true, so true right now. So I think building a better company would be very AI-centric, AI-driven, and one that really cares about their people.
That's a very insightful answer. Thank you. What is a book that you would recommend for our audience that isn't one of our books?
It's going to be my favorite book of all time, and it was also my grandfather's favorite book of all time for a couple reasons. One is I'm a huge traveler, but I think there's also a lot of business lessons that come in this book. I read the book years ago because my grandfather told me it was his favorite book of all time, and he'd read hundreds and hundreds of books. It's now my favorite book of all time, and it's called Endurance by Albert Lansing. It's about Ernest Shackleton, who was the explorer to the Antarctic, where his ship wrecked and all of his men had to live and survive for almost 2 years. And it's this true story of how they survived this incredible climate and weather and journey. And I was able to go to Antarctica 4 years ago. I was paid to speak when I was there to a group of entrepreneurs, and I was able to see some of what Ernest Shackleton saw. And the story of how they endured and got through that and how every single man survived is mind-blowing considering it was 100 years ago. So that would be my favorite book, Endurance by Albert Lansing. And Steve Jobs actually has that as one of his top 3 books of all time as well.
Fabulous. We'll put that in the show notes. Much appreciated. How can people learn more about you and your business?
All of my books, my Second in Command podcast, my Invest in Your Leaders training, everything about the COO Alliance is all on my main website, and that's CameronHerold.com, and it's Herold, Herold. So CameronHerold.com, that's got links to everything.
Is there a social where you live most for people who are interested, e.g. Twitter, X, or LinkedIn, or
Instagram? I share videos
Instagram
almost every day of my thoughts around business on Instagram. Yeah, I share a lot about my life. My wife and I have been nomads for almost 4 years now. We've been traveling full time, 60 countries in the last 4 years together, some 7 or 8 times. So yeah, I share a lot about my personal life, but I also share a lot about my business journey on Instagram for free.
Thank you. Is there anything that we haven't covered off today that you wanted to cover off?
I don't think so. I mean, right down to the end where I'm saying like none of this stuff matters, right? That's just the end to just, I think at the end of the day, if entrepreneurs and leaders would just go and say, hey, thanks for hitting that goal, or thanks for nailing that project, or thanks for living that core value, and you do that twice as often as you give people projects to work on or goals to hit, I think that goes miles. There's a story about Howard Behar years ago. He was the CEO at the time of Starbucks. And you're running a multi-billion-dollar company with 100,000 employees. You're busy. And Howard spent 2 hours every single Friday handwriting thank you notes to stores and employees in the system. So if they can spend, or if he could spend 2 hours a week, so can you.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to end. Cam Herold, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom And I guess your honesty and humanness. There's been quite a bit of that through our conversation. For me personally, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.